record? Yeah. Okay. We are recording. Well, good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to New Testament. So we're here for our New Testament literature course. And I can't believe how fast time is going. And we are already in March, thinking about April, May, and all of that. So I want to thank you so much for joining tonight. And like we said, and I'm recording this for individuals that can't make it. Remember, this is typically an online course, but I hold the Zoom sessions, the virtual sessions, so that you can ask questions, you can talk to me, because it is hard when you're doing it online, and I don't want you to feel isolated. The sessions are not mandatory, so they're voluntary. So I'll always post the videos. So, hey, you can't make it, you're doing something that evening, you can watch the videos later. Just a disclaimer, we're going to take a look at our schedule in a second. Next week is considered spring break for the entire school, so we'll be breaking for next week. So I want to welcome you once again. Let's go ahead and open up and go to our first tab, and we're going to talk about the syllabus. I just want to highlight a few things here, and then we'll jump right into week one. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. We'll jump into week one and go ahead and learn a little bit more in an intro to the New Testament. So good evening, and please make sure you stop me, okay? Make sure you stop me if you have any questions.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. You have my email address, as well as you can always use the internal D2L email. You can use that, as well as you can call or text me. That's fine. You can do that from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and my number's right there. Okay. And like we said, once again, we will have virtual classes on Thursdays at 7 p.m. It is voluntary. I will always record for you. All right, so our course, I'm looking at my calendar here. You see me looking up. Our course runs from, of course, we started on the 4th. And you see that beautiful end date? It says May the 2nd. It's a special day. Okay, so I won't get messy. It's my birthday.
Oh, happy early birthday.
Right. You gotta hold it. You gotta hold it till May the 2nd.
Oh, okay.
So I'm gonna have a big girl birthday, then I'll be 50. So I am just so excited. I'm not forgetting to be 49 before I'm 50, right? But I will and I will warn you a little bit, everybody, that's gonna be a really crazy week for me. And also my daughter's graduating from Albany State on the 4th. So I will be out of pocket a little bit the end of that week, but we'll communicate about grades and getting things in well into advance, okay?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Your daughter's graduation.
Yes. I'm real excited. She started in 2020, so she didn't have a high school graduation, y'all. So we're really excited. We can holler and we can be around people, that COVID really turned everybody around.
It did. It changed a lot of things.
It did. All right. I hope everybody has picked up the book. And hold on, I'm gonna pick mine up off of the shelf. Hold on. Okay. And the name of the book is A Brief Introduction to the New Testament. I have the 3rd edition, and it is by Bart Ehrman. And okay, I got a little glare. Okay, there's a little glare because I got my background blurred. Also, you can make sure that you have access to a Bible, which most of us can get them online. You don't necessarily have to pick up a paper Bible. That's fine if you have one. And that will definitely help you with some readings. Let me just kind of give you a disclaimer. Many times, like with the Old and New Testament courses, students think like it's a Bible study. No, but what we do is we look and we examine the literature of the books. We examine the authorship, the context of the books, the different types of books that there are in the Old, well, here, the New Testament. So I just wanted to give you a little disclaimer there. When you write, here's another thing too, when you're writing in discussions or when you're writing papers, it is advantageous for you to use versions of the Bible if you have to quote a scripture from maybe like New Revised Standard or New International Version, because they're easier to understand. Preferably do not use King James Version. Some people may be more apt to remembering how it's said, but so that you have the common English or a plainer English, you can use New Revised Standard or New International Version. Okay. All right. I am so glad that you are taking this course, because this is one of the courses that some people take it as an elective, but this is one of the courses in our religious studies program. So you had Old Testament, and so we have New Testament. So once you finish this particular course in May, you will you'll summarize, you should be able to summarize the New Testament, okay? So you'll be able to identify there are 27 books in the New Testament, and you'll be able to identify their genre. So there are different types of genres of all the books from Old to New Testament. And what do you think we mean by genre?
Is it the literature, language?
You're there, like a kind, like
Yeah.
Like sermons or narratives, letters. Is that what you mean?
there you go.
Okay.
There you go. Yes, ma'am. So we'll talk more about that in the book. So we'll have like epistles, those are like letters. We're going to start off talking about the gospels. We have 4 gospels. Well, we'll get into all of that. Okay. And one of the key things that we'll also talk about is when we examine the books, right? You want to pay attention to what's happening. So like I said, we're not necessarily doing a Bible study, but we're paying attention to what's happening around the writing, what's happening socially, what's happening historically, what are the political arguments going on in the book, because there's a lot of political stuff always going on when people are writing these books. Okay. All right. So let's get to just a couple things I just want to highlight for you. As you see, we have spring break next week. You are always welcome to work on assignments, but you don't have to. And we'll talk about next week's assignments and all that good stuff. So you don't have to worry about reinstatement because you're not leaving me. And our technical last day of class is April 29th, and then you'll have a final exam. Remember, everything's virtual, and I think you have like a final research paper or something, and all of that must be due. Ooh. You know what? I gave you 4:30 to May 2nd. We might have to talk about that because I will be away. Let me find out when the final grades are due to the registrar, so we can make sure I get everything from you, and then I can turn in those things before I leave. Okay. All right. Now I want to scroll down. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. I do trust that you went into D2L, go to that first tab at the top of your page to make sure you save it to your computer, or you print out a copy for yourself, okay?
Yes.
Just a few things before we get started with our lesson. Remember, we start our weeks on Mondays and we end our weeks on Sunday nights. So I try to make it easier for you so you're not wondering like, when is it due? So all of your work will be due on Sunday night at 11:59. So we're here this week in week 1. Make sure that you watch the video. There's a video, an introduction video from Dr. Margaret Amer. And Dr. Amer is about 18 minutes long. So you could put it on in the car and listen to her, or put it on while you're cooking dinner. It is really interesting, and she gives a great introduction and overview to the New Testament. Dr. Amer is really special to me because she was my New Testament professor when I was in seminary, and I just so admire her. She knows everything,
She
just
does.
everything.
She's super. She's
I
super.
wish I could be smart like her. So, man, she knows everything about the New Testament. All right. Next week in week 2 is spring break, so we will not meet virtually. However, you can turn in week 2's work the following week on the 25th. However, early is always fine with me, okay? And once again, I apologize for week 1. Everybody make sure you do your introductory form. Okay, I think most of you did. All right, so I'm not going to read all of the weeks, but just a couple things I want you to see. You'll see your assignments. You have a few assignments that will be due. You have a New Testament argument paper, some quizzes you will see there. So I just want to highlight how you're going to be graded. You will have weekly discussion forums, and your discussion forums, make sure that you do the reading for the week, because that's where the questions will come from. You want to make sure that you post yours at least 200 words and then respond to your classmates. Try to respond to at least 2 classmates, okay?
Yes,
Let me
ma'am.
let me turn my phone down, sorry. You'll have 3-week reading. I cannot talk tonight. 3 reading quizzes based on the readings that you'll have. You have an assignment that's called Video Summary Reflection. And this is another really, really good researcher, Dr. Jennifer Baird. We'll get to that a little bit later. You'll have a New Testament argument paper where you're going to argue a particular side. That'll come a little bit later. And then the last part, you'll have that research paper and your final exam towards the end. Okay. So I think you're really going to enjoy the course. Let me just pause for a second. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yep.
So I think the assignment where it says like chapter 2, 3, 4, that's from the book, the text that you said we should get, that you just showed us.
Let me see, which one you said the assignment?
Yes, where it says like week 3, Jesus, the Jewish Messiah.
Yes.
Are we reading Matthew chapter 6 out of the Bible, or is there a reading from the book?
There you go. Okay. So yes, that's an excellent question. So let me go back. So thank you. That's real good. I'm sorry. So
That's
week
okay.
1, you're going to read chapter 1 in your green book in a brief introduction to the New Testament.
Okay.
Week 2 is going to be Jesus, the suffering Son of God, Mark chapter 5. Week 3 is going to be chapter 6. So you see how it go down.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Week 4, can you see my cursor right here?
Yes.
Week 4 is going to be Luke. And all of this is in your book. So you're going to go to chapter 7.
Got you. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's an excellent question. Somebody could be like, hey, wait a minute. So yes, so that's going to be, make sure you follow the readings in the book. Okay, so like week 3, you would go chapter 6. Let me see, chapter 6. What's chapter 6? Page.
Matthew.
Yeah, chapter 6 is going to be Matthew, Jesus, the Jewish Messiah. I think that's page, trying to find a page number. I think it's 77.
Okay.
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
Good question. Any other questions before we jump into chapter? Let me see what we got tonight. We're going to jump into chapter 1 tonight as an intro.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, ladies, stay right there. We're going to jump into chapter 1 tonight, and we're going to do an introduction. Let me know when you can see my PowerPoint up here.
Yes, I
Yes.
can see it. We can see
I
it.
can see it.
Awesome.
Mhm.
And while I'm doing this, I want to say welcome again. And I don't want to mess it up. Is it LaDuanya?
Yep, that was perfect. LaDuanya.
Oh,
Yep.
awesome. So I want to say welcome and welcome back again, Miss Jean.
Thank you.
Hi, Jean.
I, Ladwanya.
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so we're going to jump right into the book. And remember, this is chapter 1 in your green textbook by Bart Ehrman. So what is the New Testament? What is the New Testament? And everybody make sure that you go to your week 1 tab as well. I have some notes in there for you, as well as this PowerPoint is there too.
Okay.
All right, let's chat about a few things. Remember, stop me if you got anything that you want to share. So the New Testament, did you know that the New Testament is the most it's the most commonly read book, and it's the most widely misunderstood book. Mhm. Yes. And many times, sometimes with Bibles, there are different types, and individuals might purchase just the New Testament part, but many parts of it can still be widely misunderstood by individuals. So we're thankful for classes like this. All right, so if you go to the little illustration up there, I want you to make sure you remember this. So let me see here, Miss Jean, go to the Old Testament on the right. Tell us how many books. What's up with this one?
Made up of 39 books written before Jesus was born.
Okay. And then LaDuanya, go to the right-hand side. Tell us about the New Testament.
The New Testament is made up of 27 books and was written after Jesus was born.
There you go. So that's the main difference. And literally think of this illustration with, like the book, like if you would open up your book and it's a seam in the middle. So I want you to think of that dividing line in between the books. So the dividing line, the difference there, okay, what separates them is Jesus, the issue of Jesus. So Old Testament, Jesus wasn't born. New Testament, Jesus is here. Okay, so this is after Jesus was born. So, excuse me. So it's really interesting, the stories that we'll find in the New Testament that talk about the Messiah, that talk about his life and ministry, and afterwards, after his ascension into heaven, how the Christian faith develops. So one key thing I want to talk to you about before we move on is in the Old Testament. If you were with me for the Old Testament course, Old Testament is not necessarily about Christians. So the Old Testament chronicles a group of individuals called Israel, or the Israelites, right? So they're Jewish individuals. They're Jewish. And so that's what the Old Testament chronicles. They like what they were doing and all their wars and all this stuff. That's Jewish individuals. And then when we come over to the New Testament, so Jesus was a Jew, and so we still see the Jewish culture alive and well. But when Jesus steps onto the scene, there is this new movement that comes, and he says, well, hey, I'm here and I want to show you something different. And you don't necessarily hear the word Christians, okay? So because they were not considered Christians yet. If that makes sense? Until Jesus dies, resurrected, and ascends into heaven. And then the Christian church really starts to take form. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I want you to go down to the bottom of that screen. And one of the cool things that we're going to learn this semester about the New Testament is there are so many different authors. There are about 15 to 16 different authors of the New Testament. Old Testament, you have way more than that, but about 15 to 16 different authors. But the key wonderful thing is their reason for writing is they're writing to Christian people.
Mm,
Mhm.
mhm.
So what happens is after, like we say, after Jesus' death, resurrection, and sends into heaven, these disciples are left like, oh, what are we going to do? Okay, so now we got to keep carrying on the work. And they go and they start to spread the word. They start to plant churches. Then you get to see churches develop. They're moving into different countries, you know. Well, that happens much later, but they move into different countries and, hey, made its way over here to North America and all the different places around the globe. But it is really cool how the New Testament, the letters that we're going to examine, like 1st, 2nd Corinthians, those are letters to churches, Christian churches that were in its infancy. They were like just getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Remember, you stop me if anything gets you. Okay, so let's look at this. I want you to look at the right as well. Look at that.
Yeah, that's all we can do is look at it. 'Cause you
That's
can't
all we
read
can do is look at it, right? Sure
Mhm.
can't read it. But that was a relic of a writing that was found. Now, researchers have been able to find, or archaeologists and things have been able to find evidence of copies of New Testament writings. Haven't found much from Old Testament because you just think about how old, you know, how way back Old Testament
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
Okay. So even New Testament, if you think we're in 2024, and even if we go back 2000 years, you know, that's a lot of years. I can't even fathom that.
Mm.
But you know, think about that, those books or those writings might kind of be somewhere as opposed to, let's go back 5,000 years, you know. All right. So let's look right here in the middle, and we're going to talk a little bit about the canon. And when we talk about the canon, that's basically the whole Bible. That's just another word for the whole Bible, or the canon. So how did the whole Bible or the canon develop? It just didn't pop up overnight, right?
Right.
Right. How do you think it developed?
Just over time, a collection of writings.
Yeah.
Right.
With the
You think
different
somebody
authors.
said, hey, we're going to write this overnight?
Uh-huh.
They were journaling what was happening.
Right.
Mhm.
And so as LaDuanya said, it happened over time. So you look right at the top there. This wasn't the canon, Old Testament and New Testament. I mean, look, a group of people didn't just say, hey, we're going to get this thing together and let's just sit down and get this done over a week. This took a long time. We just, I don't even have time frame for you, just a long time. So the Jews believed in the Torah, and the Torah, if you have, I'm looking at my bookcase here, if you have a Bible with you, the first five books of the Old Testament are called the Torah or Pentateuch. And those are the books that Jewish individuals, if you have any Jewish friends, those are the books that are really, really, really important to them. And some of the books of the prophets, like the major prophets. You know any major prophets?
Moses.
Yeah.
Moses, definitely. Moses was attributed to certain books, not necessarily a prophetic book. Isaiah, we could put Isaiah in that category. Jeremiah
Yeah.
in that category. Now, here's the cool thing that I want to introduce to you is when we get to, just gave myself a paper cut. When we get to the New Testament, Jesus quotes Old Testament.
He does what?
Jesus quotes Old Testament.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. So that tells us what?
He read it.
Yep, he read it. Mm-hmm. He read it, studied it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if he read it, they had to have some type of, and I'm holding up my book, but of course it didn't look like this, right? But they had to have some type of,
Manuscript, maybe?
there you go.
Yeah.
Written down.
Written down, right, for him to have access to be able to quote some of the scriptures. So he
Right.
had to have something to, guide him.
Mm-hmm. So that lets us know historically that something was going around so that people had these, at least the first 5 books of the Old Testament around New Testament time.
Mhm.
Okay. So if you look right here, by the 2nd century, some Christians ascribed authority to the words of Jesus Christ. So like the things that Jesus said, you will also see in your New Testament, it may be written in red,
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
or it may be written in italics or some other type of print so that people know that, hold up, the writer didn't say this, Jesus said it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. The New Testament also, every book that we read, something is going on, and there's always some type of conflict. And let's just pause for a second. Who do you think they were having conflicts with? Now, this could be a multiple answer question. Who do you think they were having conflicts with?
The Romans.
Yes,
Yeah. Mhm.
Romans. So go ahead.
Actually with themselves, among themselves, because like in the Old
Themselves.
Testament, you heard about them, arguing and fighting among themselves. And that's what upset, you know, those that were, I guess, in charge of them.
That's right. There was always some type of conflict with the people
Right.
together, conflict around them, conflict from neighboring cities, neighboring towns, but there was a large conflict with the government, Roman government.
Oh, yeah.
And Roman government becomes a big problem as the Christian church starts to grow, because the Christian church doesn't necessarily believe what the Roman government does, because they're still into like worshiping the Greek gods.
God.
Mhm.
All right. All right, so I want you to go right down to the bottom to this last point, which is really interesting. Athanasius is a tongue twister, right?
Tongue twister.
Athanasius.
There you go. We got to break it down into syllables.
Right.
But I want you to remember his name. Jot his name down or highlight it. Athanasius is credited with coming up with the first list. Let me mute my phone here. Coming up with the first list. There we go.
I'm gonna call him AT.
Right.
AT. He came up with the first list of New Testament books. So this helps you see that people are starting to pull things together, get it in some type of order.
Okay.
Mm.
Do you know who Athanasius was? Was he like a leader of something or?
Yeah. So let me see here. He was, yes, a leader, and I got some notes here for you. Hold on 1 second. So Athanasius, I might have to go real slow with him,
I see.
was an Egyptian. And here's another thing that I want you to remember too. Pay close attention to location. And so Egypt is located on what continent?
Africa.
Mhm.
Oh, we so smart.
Yep. That's right, you are. That's right, you are. Okay, and so one thing I want to highlight for you is that if he's from Egypt,
Mhm.
he has some color.
How about that? Yes.
So yes, that's right. How about that? We
Mhm.
have to educate folks. Listen, I don't know what it is. People think like Egypt just got like cut off.
I know.
No,
Mm-mm.
Egypt is sitting right there on the right hand side of Africa. So we want to remember that, and we got to remind people of that. Here's another thing too. So Athanasius is also known as a church father, and so we'll talk about him a little bit more, or if you hang with me for the church history course.
Mhm.
But he was real big with the Trinity. So with theology, kind of helping individuals in early Christian time realize that, oh, okay, 3 parts, three entities. I don't want to say parts. And so we credit him to that. So remember, we'll call him, remember, he's African, so he's an African father,
Yeah.
patriarchal father. So remember, yes, we got to remember.
Mhm.
Got to remember he's from Egypt. And as we do a little bit more study on him, so he was like a church leader. He was like an assistant to like a bishop at that time. And I think when we talk about this time, we're talking like early, maybe like in the 300s. Okay, so we're talking like around that time. So he was definitely a church leader, an early church leader who we can credit a lot to.
Okay.
Mhm. Yep. So jot that name down. Athanasius. I finally got it. Yeah, you can look him up, and he's gonna be in your book as well.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yes, it is. Okay, so let's go right here. And let's talk a little bit more about the New Testament, why we should study it. Let's see. Jean, I want you to take the pink, and then LaDuanya, you're gonna take my blue side.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The various books of the New Testament are typically reading as standing in essential harmony with one another.
Okay, let me pause right there before we get to the blue.
Okay.
So every book that you read in the New Testament
Mhm.
agrees with the next book, and with the
Right.
next book, and with the
Yeah.
next one,
Yeah.
until we get all the way down to Revelation.
Mhm.
Each book harmonizes or is in friendship or in relationship to the next. So that's why when we're going to open up with the gospel, so we'll talk about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay, so
Mhm.
those are the first 4 books of the New Testament,
Yeah.
but they're all harmonized.
Mhm.
No one book is, I mean, they may have material in the book that's not in another book, but there's nothing that's contrary.
Mhm.
Okay. There's nothing that's contrary. Like Jesus said, don't do this. And then in another book, he was like, yeah, do it. So
Right, exactly.
yeah,
That's not
not going to
happening.
happen. Right.
They'll say, don't do it because, but like you said, they don't say, don't do it.
Yeah.
A continuation.
Right. So what I want you to remember is every book, and really Old Testament as well, but since we're just dealing with New Testament, every book, even when you get to the epistles or the letters, even though the writer is writing from their point of view, what they saw or what they heard to this particular church, right? Typically it's going to be advice that they give to that church that's based on the gospels, that's based on what Jesus taught them to do. That makes sense?
Mhm.
Right. So in the epistles, like we said, like Timothy or Galatians, Hebrews, right? You're not going to get an individual that's going to write to them and say, hey, you should have more than one wife, right? All right, well, and Jesus didn't say that, and he gave teachings and things like that, but he didn't say that. You see, so everything's going to harmonize with each other.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
And LaTonya, take blue.
Okay. The most effective way to study the New Testament is to read each book and interpret it separately.
Mhm.
There are some books that will be in similarity with others and some differences.
Excellent. Excellent. So even after you finish this course and you are all done and you're like, wait a minute, I still want to do some more study. It's so true. We're going to break down each book. So we're not going to do John, and then we're not going to jump over to Luke and then jump over to Revelation. We're going to study each book separately.
Okay.
And then we're going to see who's in this book. What is this book talking about? Oh, okay. And then when we get to, let's say we do Matthew, and then when we get to Mark, and we can say, oh yeah, well, that was similar because last week he said, in the other chapter, he said this.
Mhm.
Mhm. And then in some books, you're going to see that, I don't want to give it all away, but there will be certain gospels, and my memory's slipping me right now. So you have Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. And I put John out here a little bit on my pinky. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called synoptic gospels. They have pretty much the same stories about Jesus, but they're going to tell them different ways. Somebody might add in some more information. Somebody might leave something out because they just didn't have it. John tells the story of Jesus, but just in a different way. In some of the gospels, you're going to pick it up from the beginning, like from genealogy. They're going to start with the Christmas story, right? Jesus in the manger.
Mhm.
But John is not necessarily concerned about Jesus in the manger and the star, and Mary was pregnant and all of this. Right? Y'all gonna be real smart. You can be like, oh no, you can be like, the birth narrative is not in John. We just got out of Christmas time. We just blinked our eyes. But when you
Mhm.
see certain things on TV and somebody quotes something in the Christmas pageant, you can say,
Yeah.
oh, that's in this, it's not in this particular book because they didn't have it. They didn't speak about it.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So you will run into some books are going to be very similar to another, but you're also going to see that there are going to be some differences because some folks added in other material that was made available to them.
Mhm.
All right. Let's talk a little bit more about the New Testament because it does have its own set of problems. It has some problems. And when I say problems, everybody, sometimes people get like a little like, oh, you know, what is she talking about? Was not necessarily problematic, the book, but we want to also remember that humans did the writing, and humans can make mistakes.
Mhm.
Listen, y'all, before I say anything else, and those people who are watching the video, Old and New Testament, these people did not have paper like we did. They didn't have printing press,
Mhm.
computers. I got all types of pens and pencils and Sharpies with erasers and all this stuff, right? They
Mhm.
didn't have stuff like that. And so I want you to understand, as also as you're educating people, and if people say, oh, it's a flaw or something like that, yeah, it's imagine you trying to write this thing and trying to make copies and not make mistakes, and you don't have no light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so let's go over here and talk about some of the problems. So the New Testament did not just emerge as like, boom, here we are, like a set of encyclopedias. So it happened over time. Nobody sat down and said, hey, we need to get the Gospels together and we need this whole thing. The writings happened over time. Okay. And so early Christians had different versions of books. And the thing that I want you to remember is what I was just saying, is that there were individuals called scribes. And scribes, I'm picking up my little pen. I got a stylish pen. I bet they wish they had a pen like this, right? So
But of course.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so they had to copy the books by hand.
Mm.
They had to copy the letters by hand, the epistles by hand. And yes, they were human. And yes, there are some mistakes. And when we say mistakes, it could be words and we're gonna examine all of this as we start moving on a little bit. But a verse could be repeated somewhere. There are some versions where and I want you to start paying close attention when you read your Bible. There are notes. So you'll see like these little manuscript notes. And sometimes it'll say, in certain versions, this is included. Well, that was because of, in certain versions, that mistake was left out. And in another version, somebody decided to add it in.
Mm.
Okay, let's go to the top. And then I want to talk to you about this picture. So we do not have original copies of these books. Just imagine, look, we're in 2024. Wind, rain, people losing it.
Mm.
It's just disintegrating, not good paper. So the original copies do not exist. But what we do have, and especially in that illustration that I showed you, what researchers and archaeologists have been able to find are copies of copies of copies of copies. Okay. If you ever get a chance, if you're in DC, there is a museum called the Museum of, I believe it's called that, the Museum of the Bible. And your mind will be so blown away. They were able to find all different types of Bibles from around the world. So if you're ever in DC area, check that out.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are differences in the copies. And remember, everybody, it doesn't mean that the meaning is gone, but it means that the people are human. And it means that in these copies, yes, because humans were writing them, there was no cut and paste. Some things were different. So they have found differences in certain manuscripts. But what I do want you to know is, let's go back a little bit. What was Old Testament? What was the language in Old Testament? What was that written in? Anybody know?
Hebrew one.
Excellent. Hebrew. And remember Hebrew because the individuals that we chronicle in the Old Testament are Jewish.
A Jewish.
Mhm.
That's what they spoke. So New Testament is written or was written in Greek.
Mhm.
Okay, so I want you to remember that. So if you hear individuals, many times, you know, if I'm preaching and I want to highlight a particular word, it's always good to define what the word meant originally in the original language from the Greek.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Because when it's translated to English, it could have a very similar meaning. It can have a very similar meaning, but the Greek language to me is a little bit deeper. So like one word could mean a whole sentence to them.
Wow.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. So I found one key thing that you will get to know about me is I believe in being truthful. And like I said, we have to make sure that we're sharing that truth with others. And I also make sure that I share illustrations.
That are truthful.
Okay, there you go. That are truthful. Okay. So I love this portrait. Now, individuals will, you know, you may see a lot of paintings of European looking Jesus.
Mhm, mhm.
Hey, look, that was fine because that's what they saw in their mind. Look, if you're European, you don't know what Black people look like.
Right,
You don't know,
right.
or you don't know what tan people look like. You
Yep.
just don't know. So if you're reading the Bible and you're thinking about Jesus and John and all them, in your mind, you're going to paint who you see. But
But
I like this picture because it's just beautiful to me. That's all. So I wanted to include it. I thought it was just beautiful, and it gives us a different depiction
Mhm.
of. Now, I can't say that Jesus was Black. I'm not saying that, but the area, we just have to pay attention to geography. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But didn't it say in the Bible that he had woolly hair?
it did.
Okay, so what does that tell you? I mean, anyone that's a scholar would say that, okay, he was non-Caucasian.
Right.
But I know that there are many arguments about that.
And just want to piggyback on what you're sharing. So in Old Testament creation, I believe you were with me for the Old Testament course, right?
I was,
So,
yes.
right. So as we come out of Genesis and we talk about those first couple of chapters in creation, we're in Ethiopia
Mhm.
and the rivers and Cush, Cush, Cush,
Mhm.
is Ethiopia, modern day Ethiopia now. So yeah, so just as we look at the cradle of civilization, if we look at where these stories are taking place, I mean, hey, you go to any map
Yep.
and just check it out.
Mhm.
All right, let's talk some more about the scribes, y'all.
All right.
These poor scribes. Now let's look at this little picture. I found this picture. This one of the scribes.
He
Now
working,
listen here.
he working hard.
You look tired.
He looked tired. He probably don't have no good
Yes.
candle. His candle probably done burnt out. Remember, it's no lamps. I got a nice lamp here. We got electricity. There's none of that.
Mhm.
None of that. Okay, so let me get a volunteer. Go over to the right. Excuse me. What are some of the things that those scribes would do?
Misspelled words.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Left out words. Lines. I don't see the other word.
Or pages.
Or pages.
Mhm.
Copy the same words, lines twice.
Mhm.
added a verse or line to a story to improve the text.
Yes. And as we move on, we're going to look at some examples of that, where a particular story may have been cut off.
Hmm.
Actually, I was just reading one last night. There's a story that could have been cut off. And then another scribe would be like, oh, yeah, I know what happened. Let me go ahead and finish this.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
sometimes you're reading. I'm gonna show you what I'm talking about. Let me see here. I got it right here. Ladies, let's go ahead. Oh,
Mm.
I'm looking at my time. Sorry. Let's go ahead and we're going to go to Mark chapter 16, verse 8. I'm going to put it up on the screen so you don't have to worry about going to it. And I want to show you what I'm talking about. An example of a change. So we're going to look at the book of Mark. And let me write down where I'm going here. So we're going to go to 16, Mark 16 and 8. And if you have your paper book, that's fine. But some of the most ancient authorities bring the book to a close at the end of verse 8. One authority concludes the book with the shorter ending, and others include the shorter ending and then and then continue with verses 9 through 20. I'm gonna show you. Okay, so stay right there, and I'm gonna go to Mark 16 and 8. Okay, let me pull it up here. And I'm gonna just pull up Bible Gateway, and we'll go to Mark 16. Okay, and I'm gonna come right back to it. Now, these are certain things that when you're reading the Bible, you're like, I don't even know what they're talking about. But now you're gonna know, and then you could tell everybody. Okay, so this is actually probably a passage that's going to be used probably in the next couple of weeks as we are approaching Resurrection Sunday. So I'm not going to read it all, but I want you to see something here. Pay
Mhm.
attention to notes and footnotes and everything. So this is Mark chapter 8, chapter 16. Now, let's go right down here to verse 8. Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. So this is when Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Salome, they were coming to the tomb because they were going to anoint Jesus's body, but he wasn't there. So if you see right here in verse 8, in Mark, it cuts off. Okay. So they give us an explanation. They said earliest manuscripts and some ancient witnesses don't have 9 through 20. So the scribe said, hold up, I know what happened. Y'all just left it right here and said they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Right? So I just want you to think of it right there. So the scribe's like, we got to finish this story. The scribe's like, I know what happened. They told me I just can't let this story go. So the scribe added verses 9 through 20. Okay, so 9 through 20 is very important, which brings Jesus back on the scene, right? He meets with the ladies. He tells the ladies, hey, tell them that I'm back. Verse 15 is very important. He said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Okay, so on and so forth. And this was not included in the earliest manuscript. So I just want to show you, let me just pause right here. I just want to show you an example of the scribes at work. And so always pay attention to those footnotes. Okay. Any questions, comments as we as we look at this?
Mhm. I think it's good that you said to read it not in the King James Version, but in the, what is it, New Revised Standard, I think it's what it's called.
Right,
It kind of explains it much better, you know. Of course, you can
right.
go back and you can go back and read it in, you know, King James. But, you know, most churches, I think,
It's hard to
yeah,
understand.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, very good.
yeah. That's why I have my famous commentary. That helps out a great deal as well.
It does. Let me show you one more before we go tonight. Matthew. Stay right there. There's one more. I was just reading. Sometimes you will see, no, find it, stay right there. What I wanted to show you is sometimes you will see the scribes will interrupt something. It's almost like, where did this story come from? Okay. Now that I'm looking for it, I can't find it, but I can't find it, but it's the woman, I believe it's the woman with the issue of blood.
Mhm.
And there was, okay, yeah, Matthew, let's get Matthew. I'm coming. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're gonna, Matthew 9. Okay, I was in Matthew 10. Okay, ladies, I'm coming right back to you. So I want you to see something here as we talk about the scribes. Sometimes you will see like stories intertwine.
Mhm.
Okay, so for example, this is in Matthew. Let's see what chapter. This is chapter 9 of Matthew. And I just want you to see something real quick. I'm gonna let you go. Verse 18. While he was saying this, no, I don't. I'm gonna go back here. Hold on. Okay, all right. While he was saying this, a synagogue leader came and knelt before him and said, okay, this man's daughter was sick, right? And
Mhm.
Jesus got up, he goes to, tend to him. Then I want you to see in verse 20. Then in the middle of this story, here comes this woman who's been subject for bleeding for 12 years and comes up behind him. But then we haven't finished the story about this child who is sick and dies.
Mhm.
Right? So it's like we have a story within a story.
Mhm.
Then we come back down to verse 23, and the writer finishes up the story about this dead little girl. And well, she was brought back to life. So anyway, I just wanted you to see the hand of the writers or the scribes are all over this. And sometimes you might be reading things like, wait a minute, I was just reading about the dead little girl. Now, who's this woman? And then this woman comes in talking about, hey, I've been bleeding for 12 years. He heals her. And then you're like, well, where's the little girl? So I say all that to say it's because we're going to talk about seams. Sometimes you'll see that the stories don't always have clean seams. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Even though it's a correlation, they're not putting
Right.
it in the exact order. Because like you
Right,
said,
right.
you can read it at the top about something else and then go down to the bottom, another story starts. And so
Mhm,
you
mhm.
really have to pay attention, to what you are reading.
So true. Right. And sometimes individuals, that's the reason why people will get turned off or confused about reading Bible passages because like, where is all this going? So you tell people, it's the scribes. Tell them it's the scribes doing it. All right. So it is 8:06. I don't want to hold you too long. Just want to hold you to a minute. Excuse me, to an hour. Don't want to go too many minutes over. But any questions for me?
No,
No, I learned a lot.
yeah, just in this
Yeah.
hour.
Well, I'm glad you did. Now you go tell everybody what you learned. It's like, yeah, and just imagine. I really love New Testament. I like preaching from New Testament. I like preaching from Old Testament, but New Testament stories, I think sometimes can relate to people a little bit better. But there's so much nuggets and hey there, but there's so many nuggets in old and the new. It's so exciting. So we're going to learn more about the books. Also, another thing about me, especially being women, we're going to learn about the role of women. Women's History Month, yay! So yeah, and they were there. They
Oh, yeah.
were there,
Yeah.
and they were carrying on, and they were working.
Huge contribution.
Right, right. All right. Well, I'm glad. Thank you, LaDonya. She said I learned a lot tonight. And we will remember, I won't see you next Thursday. We will pick back up on the 21st, right? The 21st of
Yeah,
March.
that sounds right. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. This month will go by fast. All right, ladies, it is a
Alright.
pleasure, and I'll post this video for you all to watch and for the rest of the team. But you all make sure you pay attention to week 1, which was just doing the introduction form, and week 2 we on spring break, so you can do your work, next week. But I'm not pressing you to get it done by Sunday night.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Alrighty.
All right, everybody, have a good one, and I'm here if you
Thank
You
need.
do the same.
You
Be
too.
safe, everybody.
You too. Take care, Jean.
Okay.
Your knee.
Okay. I will.
Okay, bye-bye.